Welcome to the Mortuary Masterclass, brought to you by the Champion Company, where preservation meets purpose, and every step is part of your journey to safer solutions. In this episode, we're taking a clear, myth-free look at a topic that's circulated through prep rooms for decades: the real exposure differences between phenol and formaldehyde. Both have long histories in embalming, but the folklore surrounding them doesn't always match science. So we're stepping away from tradition for a moment and looking at actual data, clean, direct, and relevant to your everyday work. Most embalmers hear early on that phenol is extremely dangerous and will practically eat your arm off if you splash it. Some say it doesn't contribute much to embalming chemistry anyway, and a few even suggest it should be banned. Meanwhile, formaldehyde gets the reputation of being the dependable, old standard with a long track record and an implied message of use lots of it. That storyline is so common it feels inherited rather than examined. The Champion Company encyclopedia article we're pulling from compares phenol and formaldehyde across the exposure factors that actually matter: inhalation risk, carcinogenicity, sensitization, vapor behavior, environmental fate, and the quantities embalmers realistically work with. And when those factors are put side by side, phenol at modern embalming concentrations does not come out as the bigger hazard. Formaldehyde consistently does. Now, none of this erases the role formaldehyde played in shaping modern embalming. It built the standard we all work from. But we're at a point in the profession where understanding exposure differences isn't about abandoning history. It's about making smarter choices moving forward. So let's talk about phenol first. Phenol is a high-volume industrial chemical used in medicine, manufacturing, veterinary applications, and more. In embalming, it helps sanitize, cauterize, dry moist tissue, lighten discolorations, inhibit mold and fungal growth, neutralize putrefaction odors, and interact effectively with fatty tissues. Those properties are why it was brought in, not because someone wanted to make embalming scarier. A big part of phenol's dramatic reputation comes from industrial phenol at 90% or higher. Those concentrations belong in manufacturing environments, not in prep rooms. Modern embalming fluids use far lower phenol concentrations, and the older high phenol products linked to past exposure issues are no longer typical. Formaldehyde, by contrast, does appear in embalming at very high concentrations, 37% formalin and sometimes well above 55%. These high-index fluids still see heavy use and are major contributors to inhalation and splash exposure. Now, carcinogenicity. Phenol is not classified as carcinogenic to humans by IARC, NTP, OSHA, NIOSH, or EPA. Some studies show limited or conflicting results, but not enough to place phenol on any major carcinogen list at embalming level exposures. Formaldehyde is a completely different matter. It is classified as a known, confirmed human carcinogen by all major agencies. The IARC lists it in Group 1. It is the chemical behind the OSHA formaldehyde standard and the cancer hazard signage required at prep room entrances. On cancer risk, the regulatory bodies are unified. In embalming, formaldehyde, not phenol, is the carcinogen of concern. Next, genotoxicity. Both phenol and formaldehyde can cause DNA changes under certain conditions. Both have shown mutagenic activity, which isn't surprising for chemicals reactive enough to cross-link tissues. But phenol does not show greater mutagenic potential than formaldehyde, and in several studies, formaldehyde is the stronger contributor. So, phenol doesn't win that category, but formaldehyde certainly doesn't either. Sensitization is similar. Phenol is not classified as a sensitizer by the major agencies, and while rare cases exist, they are sporadic. Formaldehyde, however, is a documented skin and inhalation sensitizer. It is tied to occupational asthma, chronic respiratory irritation, and contact allergies, and embalming exposures frequently exceed recommended limits. Now let's talk about inhalation, the exposure route embalmers deal with most. Phenol exposure has been studied deeply in Champion Encyclopedia for 621 and 622. Even in worst-case models, airborne phenol levels remain below recommended limits when ventilation was reasonable. In modern practice, the article notes it is essentially not possible to document phenol overexposure during embalming under normal operating conditions. Formaldehyde behaves very differently. With commonly used arterial and cavity fluids, airborne formaldehyde exceeds the recommended ceiling of 3 parts per million in roughly 60 to 70% of measured scenarios, even when ventilation meets accepted standards. Odor thresholds make the picture even clearer. Most embalmers cannot smell formaldehyde until airborne levels are already above recommended limits. The odor threshold is about zero point 0.5 to 1 part per million. Phenol, on the other hand, has an odor threshold around 0.04 to zero point 0.06 parts per million, but allowable exposure limits are around 5 parts per million. In other words, you smell phenol long before you are anywhere near unsafe exposure. It's almost like an accidental safety feature. Vapor behavior matters too. Phenol evaporates slowly, and its heavier vapors tend to settle downward, where ventilation can capture them more easily. Formaldehyde, with its very high vapor pressure, stays suspended right in the breathing zone until displaced by fresh air. This alone explains why phenol inhalation readings are consistently low and formaldehyde readings consistently high. Now, splash hazards. At pure industrial strength, both chemicals are dangerous, but in modern embalming products, phenol is used at lower concentrations and in smaller volumes. Formaldehyde is used at far higher concentrations and quantities, often 6 to 8 times more, so the overall exposure burden through skin or eye contact is usually driven by formaldehyde. So what about glove protection? Nitrile, neoprene, and butyl rubber give good protection against both chemicals at embalming concentrations. Industrial phenol can penetrate thin nitrile quickly, but again, that industrial form isn't used here. Latex gloves are not recommended because they offer poor resistance and increase the risk of sensitization. Machine damage is another rumor that follows phenol around. The article found no evidence that phenol at embalming strength is more damaging to equipment than formaldehyde or alcohol. Most machine problems trace back to long-term use of harsh formaldehyde and alcohol-based fluids combined with insufficient flushing. Certain older chlorinated solvents are far more damaging than phenol. Acute toxicity by ingestion is similar for both chemicals when adjusted for the concentrations actually used in embalming. Industrial phenol's lethal dose ranges from about half an ounce to 2 ounces. Diluted embalming strength phenol is estimated to be around 2 to 3 ounces. Formaldehyde in formalin products shows lethal doses around 1 to 2 ounces. Both are acutely toxic, but phenol at embalming strength is not documented as more lethal than formaldehyde. Environmental behavior shows quick degradation for both chemicals. Phenol breaks down within hours to a couple of days and does not strongly bind to soil. Formaldehyde breaks down within about a day in air and a few days in water or soil. Total release is higher for formaldehyde because its usage is higher. So, what is the takeaway? When all factors are brought together, carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, sensitization, inhalation risk, vapor behavior, splash exposure, and environmental fate, the long-standing belief that phenol is inherently more dangerous than formaldehyde does not match the comparative data. At modern embalming concentrations and quantities, phenol does not emerge as the greater hazard. Formaldehyde does, and consistently. That doesn't mean formaldehyde disappears from practice or gets erased from the profession's history. It simply means that moving forward, embalmers have an opportunity to choose chemicals that provide effective preservation with the lowest reasonably achievable exposure risk. It's not about abandoning tradition, it's about evolving it with purpose. As embalming chemistry continues to advance, and as more products are designed with reduced cumulative exposure in mind, this comparison becomes one more tool for embalmers who want predictable, professional results with a lower hazard profile. Thanks for tuning in to this special edition of the Mortuary Masterclass. Until next time, keep doing what you do best, championing the prep room with purpose, because embalmers matter, and every step forward is part of your journey to safer solutions. That's the champion difference.